You can do the countdown. Good morning and welcome to HART's regular board meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We have our regular board meeting minutes from July 18th. I need an approval for those.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? At this point in the agenda, we usually go to public comment. Is there anyone signed up for public comment at this time? Okay, no one is signed up. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak at this time on any item on the agenda? I see no one. Okay, our first presentation today is, I think, Nicole Lauren. Is she here to make the presentation? Miss Lauren, come on up. And I think all the board members know how to work our product here to see how it goes. Go ahead, Ms. Lauren. Good morning.
Good morning. Nicole Lauren, Manager of Talent Acquisition and Organizational Development here at HART. And this is an update on the pay for performance and development and leadership development processes that we're currently doing. So as you may know from earlier, we are transitioning to a pay for performance strategy utilizing NeoGov as our tool. And over this first quarter, the few things that we have accomplished, the project implementation team was established. We closed out the 2015 year for performance in the system, and we acted on the results of the comp study. And what we have coming up is the mid-year self-manager review. And in fact, we are in that process right now. What's currently happened so far is all employees have rated themselves, and the forms have moved on to their managers for rating. We will do a year-end review, and then we will do a compensation/budget calibration where we kind of marry up performance and learning and development. And we'll close that out at the end of the year, where employees will have discussions with their staff where they close out performance and the pay associated with this. This is going to be an ongoing process now, so we'll go right into goals for the new year from this and proceed appropriately. So for 2016 mid-year, the process is still fairly simple and it's somewhat abbreviated. There are 3 areas that each employee rates themselves on, and then the same thing happens with the manager. They identify their key attributes or those things that they may feel they do well in. Their development opportunities, those opportunities for them to improve. And then there's an area for them to comment, and they receive a rating. They rate themselves, and the manager rates them as well. And that allows the manager, obviously, to see what the employee thinks about their performance before they actually kind of do their own comments and have that discussion. So in July, we did the employee manager ratings. The leadership review and calibration is happening this month. In terms of leadership development, there's a few things we've done in that area. We've identified some of our hypos or high potential individuals. Several of them, 6 exactly, participated in a customized program with USF where they were able to partner for their organizational development certificate. All of them attended 6 courses related to our business and then had to do a capstone at the end of that. Each of them, the plan for each of them is to serve as an advocate or champion for the agency and for change management and organizational development initiatives. They are a cross-functional group, so there was representation from each area. And participants are, almost every participant has finalized their capstone now. We have a couple of follow-up meetings coming up, I think it's in the next week or so, to walk through that and then to look at what kind of actual initiatives we can do here that we can involve those folks in. We will evaluate the program for its success, and if we find that it works for our needs, we'll continue it in the future. In terms of leadership development, a couple of other things we did. We have a mid-level leadership course provided by Cutter that was offered to folks. And on an ongoing basis, there's several leadership training courses that are available. They are at no charge to HART, so it's a neat opportunity. In this training, we had several members of our leadership participate. And then coming soon, we'll be implementing DISC, if anyone is familiar with that. So that is an opportunity not just to look at the competencies and the attributes that each employee has, but being able to capitalize on that and understand how to more effectively work with each other in our differing styles. And then we also are doing an in-depth needs assessment for 2017, so really doing a methodical approach as to what competencies we need here at HART to be successful and what leadership programs might help us achieve those goals. And I believe this final slide, I'm not going to go over the whole slide. It's quite in depth, but what I'm trying to basically say here is this is just a couple of the elements of our total reward strategy. We realize that we need to be pretty sophisticated in terms of what we do to retain, engage, and attract the most talented folks in our industry. So if you look at this chart, there's a couple of items in black there, training and development mentoring program, and then you'll see pay for performance strategy. Those are just two of those items that we're working on implementing within this strategy. And that concludes my presentation. Any questions or?
Go ahead.
Is the first of all, I think I compliment you on the leadership, plan. I mean, programs that you have as part of the compensation that you're talking about. It all as a holistic opportunity for employees is tremendous.
Okay.
Is the timing the same in terms of the evaluations and the proposed, like if they were to get increases? So that hasn't changed in terms of the calendar year that they were being evaluated supposedly before, and base pay improvements or spot bonuses or whatever you do. That all is still the same
Correct.
time frame.
The timing is still the same, correct? Yes.
Okay, great. And then the capstone projects, do those go through you all in terms of topics that are of interest or value? I heard you say that you use some of the capstone either information, or when you bring them back, you utilize that training back here at the agency.
Yes, so I guess yes twice. It is definitely initiatives that are related to HART. For example, a couple of the folks chose retention and did some really good work around that. We are going to actually meet to look at all of their projects. And we do hope that, well, I wouldn't say hope, we expect that there are several places with initiatives we already have that we can utilize that skill set.
Yeah, I would just suggest, I think that's where I was going to go, is having them come back and give a presentation to the senior team on the topics that they covered and what they learned would be very instructional on both sides. So congratulations, thanks.
Thank you.
Commissioner Beckner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did you use NeoGov to identify leadership potential opportunities, or is that totally separate? How did you do that?
Yeah, it's interesting. At the moment, that's separate because we're not tracking from goals all the way through. So the goals would have the competencies and everything else aligned with them. However, what we are going to do for that needs assessment is go back to all of the job descriptions, the organizational development strategies, the scorecard that we've just developed recently, pick up all of the competencies from there. We hope that when we see alignment there, we can then put that in NeoGov. So kind of backdooring it in, but it's not in NeoGov now, so.
Was there any process that you used to identify potential leaders, or do you just, through the personal evaluations, you found that individuals had a specific interest in leadership?
I think you're a little bit ahead of where we are in that we want to do succession planning, and there we would definitely identify high potentials, people who have potential to move up, and line that up with competencies, but we're not there yet.
Okay. And what's the range of merit increases that you're considering based on their performance
Okay.
evaluation?
I'm going to look at Catherine a little bit for this one, just to be sure I've got it right.
So that, I guess I'm volunteering, so thank you. We had identified, thank you, Commissioner, we had identified for folks meeting expectations a CPI correlated adjustment, which is about 1.5%. For folks exceeding 3.5%, we did, for this initial year, reserve a couple of positions for rock stars, which would be up to 5%. This is a little different than a lot of places that will say, here's the pool and go from there. But for this first year, we wanted to make sure that our folks knew where they were going. So if I'm going to exceed expectations, I need to know ahead of time it's 3.5%, not 8%, et cetera. We're also, as we get these reviews done, looking at them from director level to chief, not to set quotas, but to make sure we don't have departments which are outlying. I recall that we did our classification and compensation analysis earlier this year to make sure that we had already said, okay, for the work you're doing, you are fairly compensated, to avoid this need of people saying, well, I really killed it, so I should get blah. Well, you killed it, but that was your job, and that's where it lines up. So condensed version 1.5 and 3.5, and a handful of 5%.
And this, it covers every single employee, both bargaining?
Only non-bargaining, not the
Only
bargaining
non-bargaining.
side. So we are at the table. We have recently concluded, thank you very much, Greg, our chief negotiator. We've recently concluded with Teamsters. They brought up the option of adding into more of a pay for performance. We have a bonus structure in the ATU contract, and I don't know where we are at the table on reinforcing or looking at some option from there. So this is non-bargaining. That's 132 positions. And ideally, once we nail it there, we'll be able to roll it out.
Okay, thank you.
Director Jacob.
Thank you. I guess I think this is terrific. Anytime you can provide incentives for people to expand their capabilities as you know, representing the organization is really terrific stuff. So congratulations on that. I think it's wonderful. I guess my question is, once we're going through the leadership training and providing those skill sets, how do we look at beyond that, you know, and really offering opportunities for these individuals to expand their leadership in terms of implementing their leadership? There's so many organizations within our community, as you mentioned, they become advocates for what we're doing, not just for HART, but for transit in general within our community. And how do we, I guess, penetrate deeper into the marketplace with our message of the importance of transit and the importance of what HART does for our community, and to get more public awareness of that through these folks that we are training through the leadership, I think is a golden opportunity for us. And I'd love to see how we, you know, start looking at that in the future as opportunity to really expand the capabilities of what we can do through this program.
Absolutely, agree 100%. I think we've done that on a very small scale. So when you look at the USF partnership, it was folks from HART and folks on the outside, so a chance to expose there. And the cutter training would be a similar example of that, but a lot of opportunity to expand in that area.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, great presentation, both in terms of detail and brevity. We like that. Thank you. All right, next up, I think, Jeff, you're going to talk to us about some options for revenue?
Good morning, Board, Mr. Chair. Jeff Seward, Chief Financial Officer for HART. On the June 6th board meeting, there was a board discussion on the possibility of looking at a policy pertaining to our additional ad valorem growth year after year in the upcoming years, including the current preparation for the FY17 budget, and allow that money exclusive use into our capital improvement program. During that board discussion, there were also questions concerning what would that impact look like, not only in our proposed budget for FY17, but in the out years if such a policy was established by the board, and its long-term financial implications. So what I'd like to do this morning is to talk to you about that discussion and answer those questions for you the best that I can. But first, I want to be able to show you a little bit of what we have already been doing with those revenues that we have been discussing. This is a historical overview of the last 5 years. And I would like to draw your attention to the ad valorem line. You'll see an ad valorem line that is in red. That isn't typical financial red like bad. This just happens to be to show you exactly what we have been doing with that funding. So since FY 2013, that line represents the amount of ad valorem that we have already invested in our capital program. It fluctuated year from year, and that was primarily based on a staff and CEO-based policy that we established a few years ago, that we were going to recalibrate the federal formula funding from its use in operating to shift that back to capital. So that's something that we've been doing over the last few years, the last couple of years, of trying to shift that money from operating back to capital investment. However, we have used ad valorem in the past for capital. What I would like to draw your attention to is in the proposed budget for FY 2017. Not only are we adding ad valorem to our capital program in an amount equal to the increase in ad valorem over FY 16, but we're also adding more ad valorem into capital from our fund balance. Now, why are we doing that if we're working on the calibration as well? Two answers. One, we have had the ability to leverage a lot of old grant funding in our organization that has been laid dormant for whatever reason. We have new budget manager in-house who's able to dissect and weed through this funding that has been sitting around not being fully utilized, jumping on our project managers to be able to move these projects forward more robustly. So we have been able, when we present the budget to you in a couple of weeks at the committee meeting and then at the public hearings, you're going to see one of the largest capital programs that HART has put forward in the last 5 years based on not only this additional ad valorem going into the program, but the usage of this old grant dollars that has been laying around. The other reason that we're adding more ad valorem this year is the flexibility that ad valorem revenue allows us that federal grant programs don't allow us. Meaning we are allowed to move much more quickly with ad valorem solicitations and procurements than we are with federally funded procurements. So that isn't to circumvent any system or process. It's to get the work done much more rapidly and still falling within the federal and statutory requirements for the use of ad valorem and property tax. So, again, the red line shows that we have been investing over the last 5 years at some level the amount of ad valorem that we receive as a percentage of the overall budget into capital. Now I'd like to draw your attention to the bottom, into the gray shaded area. The top line of that gray shaded area is entitled Cost of Additional Service per Year. So this is the cost of the additional service based on TDP enhancements that you have authorized to put service on the streets over the last 5 years. The line below that is the additional ad valorem that we have received year over year. The bottom line is a percentage of the amount of service as compared to the amount of ad valorem increase over the prior year. So let's go to the FY17 proposed budget. We're looking at a $1.1 million increase in service in the proposed budget for FY17. We're looking at an additional ad valorem increase of $1.7 million. Now that's at 95% budget based on statutory requirements. So the service we're looking at investing in next year for your consideration in the budget is 61.48% of the increase of ad valorem over the prior year. So we're doing two things. One, we are utilizing ad valorem in FY17 for capital. In prior years, we have utilized it for both capital and the increases in enhanced service that we have put on the street. And we've been able to do that while we've started to recalibrate the swinging back of the federal formula from operating to capital to allow us to have a much more increased and robust capital program. So this is a snapshot of what we've been doing, the environment in which we've operated budgetarily, and the use of our increases in ad valorem over the last 5 years. What I'd like to do now is to change the conversation to this is what it would look like if such a policy existed with some parameters and some out-year looks. So scenario number one, this assumes after FY17, that all 50% increase in any ad valorem revenue generated would go to capital. We would continue with the $1 million recalibration of the federal formula from operating to capital. So, in essence, if we were to follow scenario one, we would take that 50% of the additional ad valorem as well as the continued federal formula calibration into capital, obviously making the capital program much more robust in a growing out-year fashion than we've been able to in the past. However, it does take into consideration a 4% growth rate in expenditures over the next 5 years. We will have to really look at the amount of expenditures, which we do already, but with the loss of that additional 50% of ad valorem being able to go to operating, we will really have to look at what we were able to provide as far as the TDP enhancements are concerned. So as a look at what we have planned pursuant to the TDP that exists today, the planned service block under the numbers shows that through FY21, we're looking at the number of routes, the number of service hours we are anticipating increasing during that time period, as well as the proposed cost of that service during that time period. Scenario number one.
Jeff, before you go on, looking at all these fiscal years going over the next 5 years, what's that percentage? Is it the same for ad valorem taxes that are be coming into us? You understand what I'm saying? Which is it at a 3% every year? Is it
flat, or what do
is
you
it
say?
flat?
Yeah.
It's not flat. It's based on the state projections through the next 5 years. And
Okay.
each year it ranges from anywhere from 7 to 8% over that period of time, depending on the year.
So each year is either between 7 and 8%?
Yes.
Okay.
Based on what the state of Florida has already projected for those years. Obviously, that changes as time progresses,
Right.
but we've built in real DOR estimates for that revenue growth.
You should note that on here, that it's
Yeah.
tagged to the revenue estimating
Okay.
conference.
Thank you, Director. That's exactly my point, which is, that 7% is a pretty good, healthy percentage in ad valorem. We don't know if that's gonna stay the way it is, but that's why I was curious, because, it's harder to make plans when we're not really sure where we're gonna be at in terms of ad valorem taxes.
Absolutely.
I
We'll do
apologize
that.
for interrupting. Go ahead.
Scenario number two still assumes 50% of the ad valorem growth will go into capital, but there will be no recalibration of federal formula. We will continue to use the federal formula in scenario two for operating. So, an astute observer to this slide will note that either scenario is the movement of money. It's simply, we're taking ad valorem here, or we're taking federal formula to supplant the ad valorem that we took over here. Over the last few years, the CEO has directed us to present you a budget that, one, obviously must be balanced, but two, meets the needs of the TDP in the community, and three, allows the organization to meet its internal needs, to meet the community needs, to prepare us for future growth. We've been able to do that, balancing these two primary revenue sources over the last 5 years. We will obviously continue to do that. Based on a policy of setting aside 50% of the ad valorem, we will still have to balance, and it will slow our ability, if we even will be able to balance and shift that federal formula funding back. So what are the true differences? We go back to scenario one with the recalibration still intact, as well as the 50% ad valorem. We start to look at red, real red, going into the out years. Obviously, we will never present a budget that's in the red. We will mitigate those deficits as we move forward through a series of cost-cutting initiatives, looking for additional revenues, maybe scaling back the enhancements that can go on the street, depending on what that looks like. Scenario two, without recalibrating, allows us to stay in the black. But either way, we will always be in the black. Again, this is just a model, giving you an example of the impact of said policy. We will always operate in the black. We will always use the TDP as a foundational element to move forward in the next fiscal year. We will always do that. Again, this is just a discussion for the idea of the ad valorem set aside. Now, since we're talking about the capital budget, I wanted to share with you, and this is something that we have not really shown the board before, and we will start to do this in our budget discussions, is our funding for our capital program. Where is it coming from? And as you see, and this is representative for FY17, we're looking at FTA discretionary as about 16% of the budget, and that's essentially for vehicles. Our FTA formula of $9.6 million, we've already had that discussion on the federal formula. FTA, Florida Highway, 7.3. FDOT, MPO, which normally doesn't have a sliver of pie on this chart, but we are in talks with them right now of helping us fund a couple of our studies in FY17. And then that ad valorem representation that I showed you a little earlier. So we have, this is the most ad valorem that we have put into the capital budget in some time. And again, for the reasons I stated earlier, for that flexibility and to leverage some of that older grant money that we have to really get a lot of work put out on the street next year and really catch up on particularly our building and infrastructure needs that we have as an agency. And that concludes my overview.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Ms. Shanahan?
Good morning, Monday. Would love to start my Monday with numbers. So let me just ask a couple clarifying questions for myself. The federal formula funding, you said it's moving to all capital from operating. Or is that, you're moving, what percentage of the
We're moving
budget?
$1 million a year.
So $1 million out of your 12 million.
Yes.
And so that makes the difference in scenario 1 and 2 to positive to negative if you're not using that $1 million, if you're keeping it in operating versus trying to go to capital.
Correct.
The, let's see, what should the service increase as a percentage of additional ad valorem be? I mean, it's gone from 79% in 2014 to 62% in 2017.
There is.
I mean, where does the remaining balance go?
It goes to capital. It goes to basic increases that aren't necessary to that specific increase. As an example, in proposed FY 2017, $1.1 million of additional service. So essentially what we're saying is that it's 64% of the ad valorem increase. Whether or not it's actually paid for by ad valorem, it may be paid for by federal formula. It may be paid for by some other type of grants. As an example, in your action items today, you have 2 FDOT grants for 51X and 20X. So that's considered operating funds as well. So there really isn't a percentage target that you're looking at. If there was a
So it would be unrealistic from my perspective. I mean, this is one of the frustrating parts of government budgeting is that you react to what you're given, which I understand. But, what if the board established an 80% service increase as a percentage of ad valorem? I mean, is that an unrealistic goal or is that a, debilitating goals? I mean, there should be some performance metrics that are identified as percentages instead of 1.1 million, it's like that's.
Now I can answer that financially and Ms. Egan can answer it operationally.
Right.
Financially, we can set any and achieve any target goal for money to go to operating. On the operating side, if we get to a point where we can't sustain the operating component
Right,
of
then
it.
you have to cut it.
Correct.
Right.
The
So
money.
every year, when you add services, you add to your recurring base in terms of what's the expectation of costs, so I don't know where that, I don't know, this seems reactionary versus, and maybe I'm just too much of a planner, I would like to set some metrics that like, what is the realistic percentage as it relates to additional ad valorem that should be assigned to services. And I understand that if you add services, you're gonna add to your recurring base, so then the next year that would go up to from, whatever it is, 30%, 60% or whatever. That, you get my point. And my other comment is old grant money, that scares me to death. So I'm glad that somebody's finding ways to utilize it. Does that just mean that you're leveraging it? It's been
Yes.
sitting there, because grants usually come with a time and term of you got 5 years to spend it and you got to do this study, and so where's old grant money been laying around?
Many of these projects have been either deferred or canceled, and we have actually gone back. We're not in any sort of default status of those grants. We've communicated with the FTA on the fact that we have these, and we have presented budget amendments to be able to move forward and spend this money. For whatever reason, a project may have finished and we had additional grant money that was never utilized maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and it was sitting off in some obscure fund. We have scrubbed that, and we're pulling that over, getting FTA approval to use that throughout. And that's one reason why that pie right now looks the way it does. It typically has been a 3-slice pie in the past. So we want to spend that grant money as rapidly as possible, and being able to use some of this ad valorem as well in the capital program to leverage that. The grant money may not be enough to actually complete a project, but coupling it with ad valorem absolutely will. So we'll be able to stretch that funding much more than we could with just using straight ad valorem, or waiting for us to stockpile some money or cash, which with the type of revenue that we receive, it takes a long time. If we were to try to stockpile capital ad valorem, even at 50%, to, let's say, fund East-West BRT, you're looking at 20 years of setting money aside to be able to do that. So this is really much more compact kind of projects of roofs and infrastructure to support our bus fleet.
I would just talk about it in a different way then. Some of the verbiage that you use, just from council perspective, and I'm not a lawyer, but just from, political counsel in terms of how you talk about grant allocation and use of funding. And then the last point I'd make, which I hope Catherine covers in her update for us, is the MPO $100,000 allocation. There is pretty aggressive, pretty fast-moving MPO draft changes that are coming over the pipeline from the administration in Washington, D.C. that I think are going to change the dynamic of the MPO decision-making process here. I think that could affect your 2017 budget. So I just would put that on your radar screen. I think it's exciting for those of us that hope we eventually get to some constructive transportation adjustments to our region. It's going to be a much more regional approach, and it is being driven by the administration, and it's being driven in a very fast pipeline. So hopefully everybody's well aware of what's happening.
Okay.
Thank you for your presentation.
Commissioner Merman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Jeff, for going through this, and Catherine, this exercise. I know when I asked for us to go in this direction and find out what it would look like, I think what it does for the board is it gives us hope that we will be able to invest more capital dollars into transit projects that are needed in the community. And I think this is what people want us to do with their property tax dollars, very much. And I was going to actually ask almost the same question that Ms. Shanahan asked about, I would like to see, though, like, it's not quite this every year, okay, are we gonna do 60% or are we gonna do 70%, the next year. I would like to see more of a need-based kind of formula, with some flexibility in it. Obviously, if operations, our expenses are out of whack and we need to plug the hole.
Well, and let us bring something to the Finance Committee in 2 weeks.
Okay.
We'll bring them a couple of versions of, we have options to say, are we striving for a percentage of increase from the previous year? Are we looking at it as a portion of the budget? I mean, at the end of the day, we do a thing. We transport people around this county. So unlike this very sophisticated and very large budget that you work with at the county, we are competing transit against transit against transit. And in previous years, you've seen in 12 and 13, we made significant investments in service. Well, what that meant was we didn't upgrade the camera system. So we record to video that is underneath the bus on a DVR. And it's time to figure out a more modern solution to that. That is not a cheap solution. So we are at the point where we're saying, okay, to keep the service with the quality that our taxpayers deserve, our patrons deserve, how do we make that, capital here, service here? So let us come to you in a few weeks with a couple of options. So we are less of, we're not driving to, okay, here's how much money we have, how do we spend it, as opposed to saying, here's the goals that our board has given us and how are we meeting them with this funding.
Well, I think, and to take it maybe a step further, I think it's taking the extra revenue that we're bringing in and bringing the TDP back with that, and letting the board discuss, what are the priorities here? How do we apply this ad valorem increase to the priorities that are in the TDP so that there's, almost transparency back to the public that, we're doing what you said you wanted us to do.
So to clarify, it sounds, what would be useful as we're going in our next few budget meetings for sure, so the opportunity to have the discussion of, we've received more in than expected for ad valorem, and these are some recommendations from staff, where's the board's preference for investment? Okay, so we'll make sure we have that.
Absolutely.
And moving into next year, we're doing the big overhaul of the TDP, so we have an opportunity to really put in some great structure, some metrics tied to our scorecard and our goals and our successes, and say, here's how we're moving the process of getting transit on the road in Hillsborough County to be more goal-oriented and less reactionary.
That's
and
great.
continue our role of regional leadership.
And really with the ad valorem growth being like an average of 7%, I mean, that's pretty hefty. So we need to plan for it and make adjustments and really, look at our TDP now that we have it, make sure that it's accurate and move forward. Thank you very much.
Okay, Reverend Bowers?
Thank you so very much. I'm probably asking the same question that Ms. Shanahan and Commissioner Mormon have asked, but it's put it in a different fashion. It appeared to me that we're doing our budget based on the TDP, and it has driven how you work out the budget. Now, if we go to a goal-setting process, then come back, how would that affect what we're already doing as it relates to the TDP?
Well, that's an excellent question. It's, we would have that goal process also informing how the TDP is drafted. So right now, it's, the budget and the TDP are tied together. It's not that, it's very reciprocal. So the amount that we know is coming in is telling us how much we have available for investment and service, but then the TDP also says how we're investing the budget. If we add a focus in there to be goal structured, you'll see that in both the budget and the TDP. So it won't be a separate process, it'll just be a different filter of how we bring these items to you for consideration. So instead of a TDP of saying, well, there's X million more that we expect to come in, how do we spend it? It would be, there's X million more coming in, here is the structure from the board of how to spend it, and then what does that look like? So just an additional filter.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilman Vance?
Jeff, thank you for this. I do appreciate it. I do have a question on slide 2 versus slide 5. In the red for proposed 2017, you have 2.14 million there listed, but on the pie we have 2.284. Can you elaborate on the difference of those numbers?
Yeah, let me pull this up. Someone's gonna help me elaborate in about 30 seconds. Oh, gotcha. It's ad valorem that we haven't spent yet. That 2.1 represents new dollars going into next year.
Okay.
This money is money that's still sitting there, like in a capital reserve,
Gotcha.
that we're gonna push forward.
Okay. And my next question would be, over the last 5 years or so, it looks like we've increased about $2 million on average per year. But over the next 5 years, the projection's about $3 million. In our goal planning, how does that impact us if we don't reach that $3 million, but we're only at 2?
For planning purposes, obviously, we're going with the state proposals or estimates. Each year, we get a preliminary in June. So if that preliminary, my assumption would be, if we got that preliminary estimate of ad valorem and it was not exactly what we had thought it was going to be for that year based on whatever service that we had anticipated based on the target, we would have to come back to the board during the month of June and have that discussion. Say we were this target of X% going to operating or however it pans out was based on a 7.79% increase in ad valorem. We're only going to see a 6.1% increase, which would net X number of dollars, which would equal X amount of service. So we would have to come back and have that discussion in June in the preparation of the next year's budget. that's as soon as that conversation can occur based on how the property values come in.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, Mr. Roche.
Yeah, just a quick comment. On slide 4, I know we had the 7% built in from the state on the property taxes. Under the formula, we have pretty much flat at 12.3 million grant extended into the out years. And I believe the transportation bill had on the order of like a 10 to 15% growth over the next 5 years for transit. Did we not make that same assumption, or maybe what assumptions were made on that?
The only assumption we make on formula is that it will be less than or equal to what we received the prior year.
Okay.
We have never built any growth rate in formula because there's absolutely no idea of what that will end up being.
Okay, so,
We just keep it as
Gotcha.
flat as we can.
okay.
Like,
Thank you.
who can predict what's gonna come from Washington?
That's an excellent way of looking at it, for sure. Mr. Jacob.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The line item that I'm focusing on is the fares on slide 2, and we're showing a fairly nice percentage increase on an annual basis that we've seen across the board, and then not as much from 16 to 17. Are those the increases? If we're talking about increasing the fares, is that directly related to the additional services that we're bringing in, projected fares from additional services? Because as I'm reading some of the ridership reports, we're seeing a negative trend in the ridership reports. So how do we, with the negative trend, how are we projecting that? I'm just trying to get my arms around.
Well, the number that you see for 17 of 17.3 is not based on a fare increase. It's based on our current fare structure. We have talked about each year at the budget time of talking about do the fares need increase and what does that structure need to look like. We will be bringing a conversation next fiscal year 17 to the board on fare structure based on a couple of things. One, ridership growth and revenue, and two, regional fares based on the smart card system that we'll be rolling out, and looking at what our peer agencies are doing with their fare charges. So we will be bringing that conversation back to this board for discussion in the near future. It's not predicated on the need to fund new service. It's to fund the overall operations. So we will come back with recommendations and thoughts on what that should look like.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Jeff, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, next on our agenda, we have our action items. On items number 2A through 2E are several different authorizations that we need to do. Is there anyone that has any questions about any of these? And if not so, can we get a motion? Okay, you're moving approve from 2A to E. We have a second.
Second.
All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, next up is Chair's report. Here's the good news and the bad news. I'll start with the bad news first. We did not get our Tiger grant. We have just found that out, and Ms. Egan will talk, I think, to the specifics of that afterwards. It's very disappointing, especially after we had done a conference call with the Secretary of Transportation, thinking that we did have a shot at this. But we will keep trying to increase our dollars from the federal government to pay for this type of project. The Fare Box project is, I think, one of the most important ones we've done in this region in many, many years, and I think it's really a first start. The good news is I was in Philadelphia this past week, and I will tell you, as much as we like to complain about our transit system, as much as we like to say we're not a major city because we don't have a major transportation system, if you've ever ridden the Philadelphia system, believe me, you would be more happy here traveling along our buses than to travel in their trolley. Their trolley is an underground trolley. Now think about that. No air conditioning, underground trolley. Not a good combination in my mind. Secondly, you did not have a single fare card in order for you to go on any of their systems. So you could go on their subway, their trolley, or their buses. Two of them had the same fare card. Some of the regional stuff did not. So if you wanted to ride a regional system and a local system, you had to have two fare cards. So That's why this fare card system is so important. We are really going to be a leader in Florida, and I think in many other parts of the country, because they have older systems, because we don't have as much of a system, or we don't have as integrated of a system, we have actually a better place to start from to make it a better system. So I look at that as good news more than I look at it as bad news, because we do have something to build on. Ms. Shanahan mentioned, the MPO changes, that may help us. There are some other things that may help us in the legislature this coming year, but I think that that's a goal for us, is to be better than what some of these other systems are, because they are not doing the things that we're doing. Obviously, the trip planner that we have on One Bus Away is a great addition to it, and I'm not gonna steal your thunder, Ms. Egan. I just want to mention that it is a great thing. I've already used it, and so it's a great system. Other than that, I think that we're doing fairly well. We're gonna have a little bit more pain this coming year, because we're not gonna have the Tiger Grant funding, and it's gonna be a little bit longer before we get our dollars to do the regional fare box. But at least we knew it going in, that it was a long shot, and hopefully we'll be able to get everything done relatively soon. Ms. Egan, your report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I may make that converse, the Tiger Grant would have helped us move faster. So we're still getting our implementation. September 5th, we're still kicking off with our regional passes. And by the spring of 2018, we'll be on the regional fare system throughout the region. Tiger would have let us go faster. Tiger would have let us put money we had set aside for fare box into other capital programs. We were, of course, disappointed as well. We received the final notification list of Tiger projects late Friday. I don't know if we transmitted it to the board, so we will share that. There was one project selected in Florida. It was in the Broward MPO for complete streets. What we saw was many of the projects awarded were in the $10 to $15 million range. That was larger than we had expected. We had expected smaller grants. The transit projects, which I saw on the list, were new vehicles in Los Angeles and Nevada, which were very low emissions focused. Otherwise, the vast majority of these projects were trail programs, street programs, infrastructure, building. So we put together an outstanding package. I think it pulled us together as a region. It solidified the role that the HART team is playing, and thank you to everyone in our PMO, our project managers, for the lead role that you're providing for us in getting our entire region to move forward. So, so that's the optimistic, happy takeaway from that process.
Can I just make one comment?
Yes, ma'am.
I do think this speaks to, I mean, we can be happy about it, and I do think HART played a leadership role in the region and did a tremendous effort in terms of the grant, and I think we got aggressive halfway through the process with the politics around it, which every decision is political. It's like, and all politics are local. And so we have to not miss the opportunity to remind both ourselves and the people that sort of question our investment in outside resource alliances to help Caesar. I mean, we did a great job of utilizing who has what relationships, educating them, advocating for it, from, people across the bay to people here. And I think it's really important to, are these Tiger Grants just every year? We should be all over this starting now, today, for the next allocation, because it's, we had a very good presentation, and this area is very important politically for any side of the aisle that you're gonna go through on a statewide basis, and we should be all over advocating why this is important and reasserting our leverage and influence and not missing a dime, because it was and the person that won it, it was a total political gift, so let's just be really realistic about it. So we've got to leverage our political assets as well as the content, which was strong, again.
And if I may, Director Shanahan, you are absolutely right. This is an election year. If you look at the map, you see where some of these dollars went, why they went there. The way that, and this is unfortunate because of the way Florida is set up versus counties versus cities, is that the administration looks at mayors first and almost exclusively for the direction on where these dollars go into. And sometimes that we are at a loss because we don't have the same kind of strong mayor systems that they have up north. So, a mayor.
I don't think Broward was a strong mayor decision. Let me just
No, I know
comment on
that. That wasn't. I agree with that. I think that, but when you look at some of the dollars that go in other parts of the country, it's definitely that. And so for us, this is the second year, I think, that we asked for money for fare box. Is it not? Am I correct? On the Tiger Grant program.
We asked this year, Pinellas asked last year, and we
Right.
asked the year before, so it was.
Right, so this is, we've been consistently going after it. We just haven't been as fortunate. This, I think, was the best presentation of all the years that we've done it, and I think that we had a better plan going forward. And you're right, we need to keep pushing
Yeah.
politically for each one of these, so, and we need to have everybody on board for this, and I think we did this time, so.
Let me just say, if
Go
it
ahead.
had been President Obama's reelection year, we would have gotten that grant.
You're probably.
So it's all about timing, but it's also about being smart about the timing and smart about the relationships.
I agree. Go ahead, Ms. Egan, I apologize.
Nope. MPO changes that Director Shanahan mentioned. The Federal Register had come out in late June with a proposed change to compel MPOs to consolidate the way that they act in an urban area. So, for instance, when we look at census data, anything the federal government considers the entire Bay one urban zone. We have 3 MPOs in this area. The intent of the federal legislation passed back in 1991 was that the urbanized areas would be doing comprehensive consolidated urban planning. And the Federal Register is proposing changes to make this happen. So the proposal is proposed rulemaking, which would require areas with multiple MPOs like us to have the MPOs come together and do one regional long-range plan, one regional TIP, the year-to-year information. Wouldn't compel them to dissolve into one entity, but would compel them to get their plans all together. So we'll be watching this as it goes through the process. Administrations do a lot of different things, so depending on who is elected, if you'll excuse me, we could see another change. But I think if we don't see this on the federal level, we've got some pretty clear indications that the state is going to look at making our MPOs work more closely together. So we will continue to partner with our MPO to stay ahead of that. And I was speaking to Beth Alden about this yesterday, as a matter of
May I
fact.
make a comment about
Yes,
that?
ma'am.
This is a subject that Karen Seal, Pinellas County Commissioner, and I have been working on for quite some time. And I feel really strongly about it because, especially for our region, that hasn't gotten a lot of state dollars and federal dollars for transportation and transit and roads. You know, we need to, this will help give us more strength in that ask. It'll give us, you know, we're talking about politics. It will give us that opportunity to really make a stronger case and unite, be united. That's one thing that Orlando, Seminole, Orange, and Osceola have a regional MPO. They are totally united in every ask that they make to DOT. DOT has been wanting us to do this for some time, but we have the reluctance, unfortunately, of the separate MPOs thinking that they're going to lose. We're not going to lose. We'll construct the agreement so that everybody will have equal footing, the same footing that they've already had. The local projects will still be done local. I mean, you can have, you know, a subgroup. I'm not sure how it would be organized, but there are ways so that nobody loses in this and that we gain the funds that should be coming here.
I'd like to say something.
Yes,
I mean,
go
I have
ahead,
the
Ms. Shanahan.
language, I have the proposed language right here. So Catherine, I think, was being very nice, and I am applauding this. I mean, this is a top goal of the outgoing Secretary of Transportation. Let me just put it in terms of the reality of this happening. 1 MPO per urban area would be required to redesignate new MPOs with boundaries that meet 1 MPO per urban standard. Urban areas that cross state boundaries are not exempt from the 1 MPO guidelines. A 20-year long-range transportation plan, short-term, I mean, it is a huge step forward from my perspective in terms of our region of the state to leverage the ability to actually act as a region and get out of the very localized MPO politics where I know people try to save their jobs and don't want to lose this and don't want to lose that. It is, it says that it would require approval by 75% of local governments. Current administrative code makes it extraordinarily difficult to merge MPOs because it requires 75%. That will all go away. And they're going to work with the FDOTs and the governor. So this is very strong, very directional, very life-changing for this area opportunity from my perspective. And I understand it's on a fast track and it's moving.
Commissioner Miller?
Not only is it a federal issue, there's probably going to be some legislation filed this year to combine MPOs, urban MPOs in the legislature, which will probably get some teeth once these elections are over, because the legislature is aware of what's happening at the federal government, plus the fact there's some legislators who felt a long time ago that we had too many MPOs. And so I'll let you know now, there's probably going to be, there will be some legislation probably filed to combine some MPOs, so we might as well get ready.
Okay. Any? Yeah.
Well, and all I
Commissioner Miller.
want to say is, people are afraid of losing jobs, but we've been losing money.
I know, I know.
We have
Trust me.
lost millions and millions of dollars that could come here.
Director Jarosh?
Yeah, I was just gonna say to Commissioner Miller's comments, I think when Senator Brandis came, when he was asked, that was his, like, number one goal, or when he was asked about, regional things. So I believe we have some pretty high power people behind that movement as well.
Okay. Any other questions? Ms. Egan, are you done with your report yet?
I'll go fast.
Unfortunately, we still keep interrupting.
Any other
you.
comment in your
Any more political comments we'd like to make today?
I will say, this is the first transit environment I've been in where there is not a combined MPO. For example, Dallas-Fort Worth has one MPO for 8 counties, over 5 million people, and it covers numerous transit agencies. So there are lots of blueprints for making this be successful. That's my wrap-up on that. Thank you, Councilman, for mentioning One Bus Away has added the trip planner. We're the first agency in the country to introduce this feature. In short version, this turns your One Bus Away into a Google map. By that I mean, if you have your trip planned in, you've done the trip planner, something happens, bus breaks down, traffic fluctuates, act of God, burst water main, and your trip gets busted, it will automatically send you a new trip. This is what you take for granted in your car. It is an obstacle to transit, and we've made it go away. HART was instrumental in pushing this. So I don't see Ruthie Riz Burkhart in the audience, but planning team, thank you to our ITS team for pushing this and making it happen. And thank you for letting me nag you into that. Our HART Plus team has also recently adopted a performance window. As recently as 1.5 years ago, when patrons came to you and complained about when we picked them up for HART Plus, we would say, I'll be there at 5, which meant 4:30 to 5:30. Effective this Monday, today, we'll be there at 5. We could be up to half an hour early, but we cannot be late. We've also been focusing very sharply on our on-time performance of when we pick you up versus when we drop you off. It's difficult for the trip to do both for you, and so the CEO Weekly that came out, I want to say 2 weeks ago, included some data, but I'd like to highlight, since June of 2015, in the past year, our on-time pickup window was at 75%. A year ago, it's over 88% now. That's still, we need to improve, but that's a huge improvement. Getting you there on time was at 90% a year ago. It is at 94.7% now. Now, that still means 1 trip out of 20, we won't get you there on time. We understand that is not acceptable, but better than 1 trip out of 10, and we are continuing to get it to where we will always get you there on time. So a lot of work by our team on that. We've also gotten our bus on-time performance to 85%, up from the low 70s last year. So a big focus on getting schedules out there that are more reliable, and meaning that we actually are getting you there when we say we're going to get you, and putting more time in our schedule. So these are big changes for us. In our marketing department, Steve Rosenstock, do you have a statue today? Don't get. But we received a Gold Star of Excellence for our website overhaul from we received a 2016 Communicating Awards. Thank you very much, Steve and the group. Again, overhauling the website is just another component of changing how folks view us, which takes me to our final. We will be doing our State of Transit event on August 16th. I believe we are finalizing some of our speakers, so you're going to see some exciting information coming out this week with your save the date. And this will be an opportunity to say how all the cool things we are doing integrates our plans, our partners' plans, what this means for the region. For items like the premium transit study, we had presentations last week. I believe staff has made a selection and will be going through the process for recommendations and negotiations. So we will be coming to the board soon with that information. Premium transit being the regional study looking at CSX and all these other corridors. And the State of Transit event will just bring together how all these transit and transportation issues come to a knit together vision and show HART's role with that and how we are continuing to lead to better regional transportation.
That it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, your general counsel's report?
Just a very brief update. There's a case currently pending in Palm Beach County. It's in the circuit court. It's a challenge to the adequacy of the 3-minute public comment rule. The judge refused to dismiss the case, meaning she takes it seriously. So we could be looking at a revisiting to our policy depending upon what happens. It could be much ado about nothing, but it could also be a sea change. We will monitor it and we'll let you know what the developments are.
What are the facts of the issue that they're dealing with?
The challenge was brought by a couple of perennial visitors to the county commission who felt that 3 minutes to comment on the entire agenda was inadequate and denied them the rights under
Which kind of commission?
Palm Beach.
Palm Beach.
Oh.
Where else would you expect?
Commissioner Miller had some people in mind, is what happened.
You could have stopped at Palm Beach.
So it may not go anywhere, but it might,
Oh, not in
because
Palm
obviously
Beach,
the
it
circuit
will.
court has taken it seriously.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Mr. Smith on that? Okay, we, of course, always have our financial highlights and status reports in the back. If you have no questions about that, board, we now ask for public comment, any general comments at this time. We have Mr. Gary Cloyd who is here. Mr. Cloyd, welcome back. Please come up and make your comments. And unfortunately, you only have 3 minutes until they decide.
3 minutes is directed from the nation's capital, so anybody on the floor that can do it in 3 minutes, certainly hope everybody down in Florida can do the same thing.
Well said.
Gary Cloyd, 1402 East Chilkoot here in Tampa. I wanted to bring up a couple of recommendations for increased ridership. I think with the streetcar operating at an early frequency starting next month and maybe hopefully in November, we get some good word from people over in St. Pete on what we can do on transporting people. Will help get your numbers to where they need to be. As far as transit investments, a lot has been made in the media about investments, what we have done as far as citizens and as far as the board. I will tell you that you, as a board, has followed the executive summary and recommendations from a transit study that was done a couple years ago to a T. So now we're just waiting for projects to be developed, implemented, and built. And once that gets done, we will be able to look at what ridership will be. Increases in population in parts of the county will dictate what you guys can do. The last thing, the Center for Urban Transportation a couple years ago did a study for the Metro Rapid. As those numbers go up, the land use over in West Shore will help us find out how we can move people in the West Shore area. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else in the public that'd like to make any general comment at this time? Okay, I see no one. Any old or new business, any board comments, board member comments? Is there? I was going to say, if anyone would like to motion to adjourn, we have a motion to adjourn. We have a second? Second. And we are adjourned for today. Thank you.
10:05.
Yes.
Planting a garden and watching it grow is fun and fulfilling, but you may inadvertently be growing something dangerous, mosquitoes. But there's an easy way to nip them in the bud: drain and cover. Mosquitoes breed and stand